Okay, welcome. Welcome, Facebook Live. And I'm here today with the co host of this segment. The other co host isn't here, as you see, but I've got Charles Minton here, and we're carrying on in these important times. So,
Good
Charles,
afternoon, everyone. Yes, ma'am. Yes, yes. Good
yes,
afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be before you all today. Important times indeed.
okay, so of course, we had an opportunity before we came on just now to start to talk. And when Charles first came on, I wasn't even on because where was I? I was listening to the impeachment hearings,
Right.
and these are critical times. So let's just start, Charles. If you can start and talk about what is important right now that we need to know, think about, and do. And then we'll talk later about what the Racial Justice Collaborative is doing right now. But what do you think, Charles, is important for this time for us?
Absolutely. It's interesting. We always seem to present our thoughts when there's literally our government and all the things surrounding the government seems to be in upheaval. As we speak, as you mentioned, folks are getting together in terms of impeaching President Trump. So there's a lot to digest just with that aspect, along with the events which occurred week before in terms of folks storming our Capitol building and literally suspending the functioning of our government. But just reflecting on your question in terms of where are we and how can we analyze the situation, I'm thinking about a lot of things, but specifically, in reference to a quote by FDR in terms of presidents are selected, not elected. So once again, presidents are selected, not elected. So just that statement alone by FDR has so many different aspects to it. For me in particular, it sort of ranged true for me just in terms of where we are as a country, and specifically a lot of folks having buyer's remorse, specifically in terms of electing President Trump for the office. But for me specifically, I know him along with many other presidents in the past were necessarily elected, they were selected. So in essence, as we know, pretty much the vote of the people do not necessarily align with who becomes president, as we've seen throughout the years. Um,
But
so
that, and
right,
Charles, let me ask a question.
right.
Um, that's intentional.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
it's intentional. So
Right,
what talk about the intentionality of that? Talk
right,
about how do we really get to this place where we can have 8 million, or in the case of Hillary Clinton, 3 million more votes for one president,
right.
one candidate, and yet the other candidate either gets selected
Hmm.
or tries to form a coup so that they can take over. What mechanism in this country do we have that allows that, and why
Oh,
is that?
right. So pretty much, quite simply, the forefathers of this country who created the Constitution did not trust the will of the people to effectively put in office the president of the United States. Hence, we have a specific check and balance in reference to the Electoral College in terms of sort of providing pretty much the way in which the electors they get together, as was the case, well, in the case last week, and they pretty much is supposed to be aligned with the will of the people. But as we saw last week, that's not necessarily the case. And so pretty much through the Electoral College, which is supposed to abide by the votes of the people with regards to a particular state, then those electors are chosen and then they get together and then they pretty much make the vote for the President of the United States. So going back to your question, it's pretty much a guideline put in place by the creators of our Constitution, just in terms of not trusting the will of the people. But just reflecting back earlier in terms of why I mentioned what I mentioned in terms of FDR, and in regards to what's happening now, a lot of folks are having buyer's remorse in terms of the election of Trump. And I think specifically for Black people, I think we're falling for the okie doke once again. And I think it's tricky, just in terms of what's happening with a lot of white folks throughout the country, just in terms of lumping all the evils of this country on the shoulders of one man, that man being Donald Trump. So in other words, he's a representation of all the evil, which, this world, or which this country specifically is currently dealing with. And once he's, pretty much brushed away, everything will go, quote unquote, back to normal. So in essence, what's happening now is folks are getting together. A lot of them who ended up voting for Trump are now getting together just in terms of getting him out the way. It should have happened perhaps months or even years ago, but it seems sort of a moot point now for it to happen, like literally days in which he's going to leave anyway. But it just seems like a dog and pony show on folks, in terms of why folks are getting together in terms of, voting Trump out. But specifically in terms of Black people, and in reference to the events last week, I just want Black folks to really take in, and I know a lot of us are, in terms of the events last week, and to really think about their reaction, or specifically how they should feel in reference to what many will call white supremacists pretty much storming the Capitol. And for me specifically, as a Black person, I was appalled by many Black people, I guess, feeling a sense of, I guess you want to call it anger, or pretty much, and then this may not be a popular opinion, which I'm sharing, Diane, that's, just a disclaimer, feeling anger in terms of the events last week. But when you think about it, for me, what I saw last week was you had a group of white nationalist folks who simply got together and pretty much were angry because they felt like their voices were not being heard in terms of the way the election panned out for them. So their course of action was to storm the Capitol and to, in essence, make their voices heard for everyone. And as a Black person, I look at that event, and then I sort of juxtapose that with the way in which we as Black folks throughout the years have sort of presented our case in terms of being angry at the way things are going. And in a lot of ways, I felt anger at our people, just in terms of, well, why the hell can't we do something like that? Just in terms of making our voice heard in reference to, displaying to the world our anger. Oftentimes when folks of color feel anger with regards to a certain situation, we go to looting businesses within our own neighborhoods, within our own communities. So pretty much it's sort of like an isolated incident. So a lot of white folks and folks in power sort of look at that as just a display within their community. It doesn't really extend to them because it's not happening within their community. It's not happening within their preview. It's not happening within their scope of influence. So it's sort of discarded. Whereas what happened last week was in the eyes of America in totality. So therefore, we all had to pay attention. So I think in reference to that, I think the way specifically Black folks should look at the actions last week as a pretty much call to action. And we're going to, dive into deeper in terms of what specifically the collaborative plans to do in terms of doing our part in reference to affecting the lives of Black folks and Indigenous people, within this country. But to me, Black folks should feel a sense of empowerment in reference to the events last week. And just in terms of thinking, it doesn't necessarily have to be to that level in reference of storming the Capitol and putting your lives in danger, but begin to think about perhaps thoughtful ways of making our voice heard so that the mass of folks within this country will begin to pay attention and not to sweep it under the rug.
I disagree
Right.
with a lot, not the passion that you hold, but the focus that you take. And so I think, look at the difference the years of the civil rights movement,
Right.
we look at the sit-ins and the lunch counter sit-ins. Look at the bus drives to, to be able to sit in the bus station, or
Right.
look at the efforts to not have to sit in the back of the bus. And so look at the water. If you look on the back wall back behind me, you see a picture entitled Courage. And that is Black people, uh, three of them, that are standing up against the wall. They're all dressed in their Sunday best, suits,
Mm-hmm.
ties, and they're being pushed into the wall by water from a fire hose.
Right.
And, there's just like example after example, and that's years and years and years. And so, so the question is, become angry and then do what? So we can, I have no qualms about what Black people have ever done in this
Right.
country or do now.
Right.
So,
Right.
and I don't ask I wouldn't ask Black people or myself, and I lived those days. You don't see me
Right.
out there with the water hose. You see a few people that were very courageous,
Right.
and they were expressing the same thing that you're talking about doing, letting the world see
Correct.
what it is they were angry about. They
Right.
they when they walked across that Edmund Pettus bridge, they were just trying to have a march and walk across that bridge. They weren't armed. They didn't have they didn't take up sticks and stones and start to pellet the officers that came on horseback. They didn't do any of those things. So here you've got people who are willing to put their own bodies on the line
Right.
and take the punishment, and
Right.
all to let the people of the world know.
Right.
So, and why did that come about? Were Black people in the 50s and 60s willing to do that? And you have to go back in American history and you see that Black people had tried everything. There was a civil war that was fought over slavery. I don't care what people say. The
Absolutely.
reason was
I don't know
slavery.
how that could be even.
Black
I don't
people,
know how that could be argued. Absolutely.
right? Black people didn't want to be slaves
Right.
for white people. And then there was Reconstruction, and there were few years of that where they actually had Black men had the right to vote, and they voted and they made some change, and then they were stormed and they were killed. And
Mm-hmm.
so the thing is that um, the, let's talk about the Electoral College, for example. The Electoral College, now what the Electoral College does, it gives the same, and the whole purposes of the Senate. They give two representatives from every state. So you can
Right.
have a state of California and you can have a state of New York representing many, many people, because Black people, for example, have
Right.
moved up the coast. They haven't moved so much into the center of the country. But
Mm-hmm.
states like Utah and Wyoming and Kansas and Nebraska, or any states that's just sparsely populated, they have as much say and control. So all of those things have been put in place so that the few could control the many.
Right.
So and I don't think that that was the founding fathers trying to, well, they were trying to make sure that it was intentional to not have the minority oppressed by the majority. But
Right.
now there are certain things that we need to take a relook at.
Mm-hmm.
But I never will say that Black people should take an example of white people. Never, ever, ever, ever for almost anything, because white people have just not been a good example of almost anything. Even like to have they have structured everything so that all of the resources and the money and the power go to them. But then what do
Absolutely.
they do with it? They use it to oppress and to violate. And then as soon as something happens that they don't like, then they're willing, and then they point at 1776 and say, we're patriots and we've got to go and overturn the government. I mean, the civil rights movement was not about overturning, overthrowing. It was about getting the same opportunities. Black people have all, it's like what the young woman said in the video of, of the protest. She said, white people should be happy that we're seeking inclusion and not revenge. And so that's something about Black people. We're just not trying to overthrow. We're trying to participate. And that's something that we need to look at and use, not just to say, look how good these Black people are, because the whole church came out and said, forgive the white man who shot and killed 9 of us. I mean, there's some things and some change that has to happen. So I agree with you that we have to look at civic engagement, but not. We don't use the white people and what they're doing for anything. And if anything, we need to get behind the laws and make sure that those white people, including the representatives, and pay the price. If they were domestic terrorists and participated in that, whether they were police officers, firefighters, state representatives, they need to be on trial and they need to go to jail. So,
and you're right.
So there it is. That's what I think about where we are.
And I think, to that point, and it's been said, throughout the course of the week, imagine if Black folks in mass did what a lot of white folks, or what the white folks did in storming the Capitol last week. They would have been gunned down on sight. And as we know, there were times, throughout the unrest that was occurring during the summer, whereas when we had Black folks pretty much trying to present their case at the state capitals throughout the country, white policing was in full force in terms of quote unquote maintaining order at those rallies. In reference to when Black folks, when we wanted to really present our voice, white folks were there. I mean, the police were there just in terms of maintaining order, just to ensure what occurred last week didn't happen during the summer. And I think that was calculated. And just going back to your point in terms of all the events that occurred, during the 60s and even before that, I think that was calculated in terms of direct civic engagement, in terms of the issues, in terms of rectifying the ills of racism. So therefore, you have a connecting action for dealing with those issues. It was calculated and it was presented thoughtfully, just in terms of the marching and the protests which occurred. And my only issue is I just need to see more calculated action steps taking place, specifically within the Black community, in terms of helping to rectify the ills of racism. And to your point, not necessarily looking for the actions of white folks, what they've done and what they're doing, but specifically coming up with our own course of action in terms of dealing with these issues. I'm in full agreement with that.
And I agree with you, Charles. I think that absolutely we need to look at civic engagement, and we need to ask ourselves, what is important to me? Start with me. What is important to me? What am I willing to do? We know that in schools, for education, for example, for a whole bunch of reasons, when you look in PTA meetings in different schools, parents don't come out anymore. So it's not the education of the children. It used to be that. Right after slavery, the first thing that Black people did, believing the hype that the problem is that you're ignorant, the first thing that Black people did, and because they were kept from learning to read and write, the first thing they did was they built schools, and they sent their kids to school. And they didn't keep them on the farm, on the land. They wanted their children to learn because they believed that education was the key. But what we have seen, Brown versus Board of Education, here, that was 1954. Here in Boston, it was 1974 before desegregation of the schools started happening, and then
Right.
all hell broke loose. So
Right.
we can't expect that Black people are going to pay any attention. Now I have to applaud with a whole big rounds of applause,
Right.
whatever that all the things that Stacey Abrams and the people that work with her were able to
Right.
do in Georgia, and that shows the power of the vote. But the question now, what you're saying,
Right.
I want to know, what do Black people want? We wanted education. There were a lot of things that we wanted, we didn't get. So what are we willing to fight for? And I don't mean overthrow the government. I mean,
Right.
what are we willing to come out for? What are we willing to speak up for? What are we willing to do whatever it takes to get? And I don't know that. And so getting to the Racial Justice Collaborative,
Right.
that's one of the things that we are going. We've got a plan of action, but one of the things that we're going to do, not this minute, we have some other things right now, but we're going to start. We're going to create some open forums to go, and not just the Black community. Really, we have to be. We're a country of a multi-ethnic, multiracial country. And if we look at what do we want,
Right.
and then we keep asking that question of why, we'll get to what we really want. And then we can see and help people to see that we're all wanting the same things. And I totally, fully, 100% trust the universe. We talked a little earlier, Charles, about the virus. What this
Right.
virus has done, besides kill everybody and force us into virtual, which has turned out to be a good thing. What the virus has done, it's exposed. It's exposed. Now, who are the essential workers that keep getting the virus? Who, it's exposed. It's exposed the fact that healthcare. I mean, who doesn't have healthcare? Who are living in communities where they're exposed to the virus? It's exposed the wealth gap that 250, and that's probably an old number, $250,000 for a white family wealth, as opposed in Boston, as opposed to $8 for a Black family. And so, and it's also exposed the fact that the jobs, if we think, don't be fooled like the foolish people that believe in the coal industry, that believe that those coal jobs are coming back. That's not healthy for anybody.
And I
So
think,
let's
Diane, would it
not
also expose,
believe any
right,
of that.
specifically in reference to COVID, it exposed the rich continue to get richer. We saw the, the clips, right, in terms of Zuckerberg and Musk and a few others.
Yeah.
Their overall capital has expanded during this time of unrest, and of course during the pandemic. And you say to yourself, well, with all this government shutdowns and everything happening, and folks don't have food to put on the table, how is it that these, I guess, capitalist fat cats, is another way I can put them, are continuing to somehow prosper during this time? So to me, to your point, it sort of exposes the issues and the ills of where we are as a country.
It's the
Absolutely.
system. And so we because look at the Zuckerbergs and the Musk and all of them. There's a handful of them, and they not only have more wealth than the rest of the whole country, they're not willing to share it. So we have a hoarder society, and then we put our lives in the hands of representatives, and they vote not to send. They vote that people that are on unemployment, they don't need help because that just makes them lazy. That's what has also been exposed. When we listen, because of all the technology, we can hear exactly what they say. But now I agree, Charles, that is on us. When we hear the people that we elect that say those kinds of things, and then that's not me in the state of Massachusetts where I am, but there are states like Kentucky and Mississippi and Alabama and even Georgia and Kansas and Nebraska. And you see people who need help there, they vote for their same representatives over and over, taking food off of their table. But what do their representatives really represent to them? They represent white supremacy.
Right.
It looks to me like white supremacy is on the table and people are voting to try to maintain at all costs white people in power at all costs,
Right.
controlling everything so that you only see white faces. This is
Mm-hmm.
100% about race. And
Sure.
so we have to look. I mean, we've never done a reckoning in this country from slavery to Reconstruction to, to anything about race, and more than even healthcare, and more even than the wealth gap. It's about race, and we've got to put that out there, and we've got to demand. But while we demand, we also have to take responsibility for ourselves and say
Right.
civic engagement. What
Right.
can we do? How can we make these demands heard? What's important enough for us? What do we want?
Right.
What do we want?
Right. And I think at the heart of what you're saying in terms of civic engagement is pretty much outlining our needs, specifically within our communities. And you sort of touched on it earlier. It's been, made crystal clear, throughout the course of history. The laws of this country specifically have not been to benefit Black people. I mean, I don't know how that could be denied, specific,
No,
in terms
that's
of,
clear.
right,
100%.
absolutely. Right.
Look at everything and we'll see. And they don't even deny that.
Right, right. Three-fifths compromise in terms of, Black folks not even representing a full person in terms of government law. Even going back to Dred Scott in terms of, the Supreme Court sort of interpreting the law to mean these things as opposed to what it was intended in terms of Dred Scott not being afforded the laws which, and the liberties which should have been his mandate in terms of being a person born in this country.
But
Right.
Charles, if you go back to these, that's why I heard a Black representative and he started to say our founding fathers, and he just said the founding fathers. Because
Exactly.
you go back to the founding fathers and you read what they said, and you see that the laws that they created and the structure they have, it was white supremacy from the beginning. So
Right.
we've got to go back, and this all has to change.
Right.
And
And to that point, right. And to that
because
point,
it's
right.
never, this is the way things are, is exactly the way things were intended. And so when you see the white people come out and storm something and say they're patriots, that's because that's who they always were. And
Right.
that's who they believe, because they have the white privilege, just like they believe they can rightfully believe they can storm the Michigan Capitol, and they
Yep.
can all have guns in clear sight, and they can go inside the hall just like they did at the Capitol building in DC.
Right.
And the police let them in, everybody lets them in, because that's what you do for white people. And
Right.
so this is the example we have. So they're not a bit afraid to storm the Capitol building or anything, because this country was built for them and they can do anything. You don't see Black people storming the Capitol, especially not with
Right.
guns, because they would be dead. They bomb Black people always. So
Absolutely.
so there's no
Yep.
doubt about that.
Right. Right. Malcolm X had a speech, and I love Malcolm X. Made a speech, the ballot or the bullet. So in other words, Black folks recognizing their power in terms of voting folks in, as well as perhaps, if need be, arming ourselves to protect ourselves from white supremacist folks who want to take away their civil liberties. And I think, go back to your point in reference to voting, I think we came out in full force and voted specific individuals in, specifically, Biden and the folks within the Georgia, the Senate, and many others throughout the country. We came out in full force and voted these folks in specifically. So in other words, these folks would not have been elected unless specifically in record number, Black folks got together and put these folks into positions within our government. So I think now, going back to your point in terms of where do we move on moving forward, I think it's incumbent on us to begin holding these folks accountable in terms of meeting our needs within our communities. I think that starts with specifically demanding reparations. It's not a matter of, wanting something that perhaps should be given. It's our mandate for helping to build this country.
It's
So now we
time.
have to,
It's time for a
right,
racial reckoning.
right,
Reparations is on the table. The other
right,
thing, let me add to what you're saying, Charles.
right,
Yes, we managed to vote in Biden, and yes, there were enough Black folks voted in Georgia to
right,
to turn Georgia blue, and the
right,
Senate.
right,
But
right,
but I've looked. I've done a lot of looking at genealogy, and if you look the whole South, there's in South Carolina. I mean, there's more Black people in most of those states than anybody, and
right.
so we also have to look at ourselves and say, why are we all sitting here and not taking up the ballot instead of the
Right.
book? We're not
Right.
taking either one, but why don't we vote? And so the question we have to ask people, and that's what we're going to do as a racial justice collaborative.
Right.
Charles, you and I are going to spearhead this effort, and we're going to get other people to help us. The effort is going to be open forums, and we're going to find out, what do people want?
Absolutely.
What is important enough for people to stand up and do what you're saying? Demand it. We don't know, because I've had too many times when I go to meetings that were about things for the community, and I'm one of two people.
Yep.
So we're not doing the right things. We're not asking what people want, and we need to find out what Stacey Abrams is doing. Well, I know one thing she's doing. They're on the ground. They're meeting people. They're talking to people. They're building support daily for years.
Hmm.
And so, but we don't know what we want. We don't. That's the problem, Charles.
I tell you one thing
What
that
do we want?
I tell you one thing that Black folks should want, and it should be at the top of everyone's list, and it should be Black leadership, specifically centered around Black businesses flourishing within our communities. For whatever reason, a lot of times within our communities, we have other folks within various races coming in and pretty much having ownership of our food and our clothing and other various aspects. So we, in essence, end up giving our money to individuals who don't necessarily live within that community. They end up taking that money, and then they live and they go within their flourishing and thriving suburban neighborhoods and hoarding and taking the money, which in essence, they're being afforded that business due to Black dollars. So I think at the heart
Charles,
of,
let me
right.
push back on that a little bit.
Okay.
We had that. It was called segregation.
Right.
And so we couldn't wait. We wanted integration. We wanted our
Yep.
kids in white schools.
Right.
We wanted to go to Black doctors. We wanted to go to white doctors. And I mean, we want to go to white doctors, white lawyers,
Right.
white everything.
Right.
We wanted white, white, white.
Yep.
And now so now we don't have, but we don't have Black professionals. Well, we do, but they want it out too. Everybody wants out of the Black community. They want to go into the white community. Now, there are reasons for that. And some of those reasons are that, white people have everything. So Black people want to go where the stuff is. But the other thing is, it's a deeper thing. There's a belief down to our core, in our bones, believing in white everything. We believe white skin. We believe white hair. We believe white face features. We believe we believe in whiteness, and that is on us. So, and I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying, here it is. And so white people, yes, need to change. Black people at least need to recognize that we are fully white supremacist, just like the people that were storming that. We just know we wouldn't get away with it.
Right. And we know, of course, a lot of times, and we spoke about this briefly within other podcasts, Black folks live in the neighborhoods that they're in because they weren't allowed to live outside their neighborhoods due to redlining.
We would all be somewhere else.
Right, absolutely. So in other words, we just have to work with what we have. And I think a lot of that comes with Black empowerment, specifically centered around Black ownership, centered around keeping the value of our dollar within our communities, because oftentimes white folks can sort of circumvent a lot of their costs within their neighborhoods due to the taxing, due to taxing constraints. So in other words, due to taxing constraints that sort of like trickles down into education and various aspects within the community, and oftentimes within like a lot of inner cities, there isn't like a capital in terms of taxing ownership because we don't necessarily own houses. You know, so who's getting that money? You know, so we're not getting that trickle down of money that a lot of folks within suburbia or within affluent neighborhoods end up getting. Black folks within certain communities aren't afforded those same luxuries.
I agree. I agree.
Right.
I agree. And I think that even if we're white supremacists, even
Right.
if we believe in everything white and we want to see white people around our dinner table everywhere, and we'll do whatever we can to do that. Even
Right.
if that's true, we still deserve to be treated. We deserve equal treatment. And more than that, we need to participate in changing the structure of our society, our system,
Right.
our government, so that
Right.
people, not just Black people, but people get a share of the wealth of this country. We
Absolutely.
cannot live with hoarders
Right.
withholding all the wealth. Even the white people that are poor, that are voting for more poverty for themselves, you know,
Mhm.
that's something different. But
Right.
that's because they want to maintain white supremacy. We believe
Right.
we don't want to maintain white supremacy, but we adhere to what we love white supremacy. So, but it doesn't matter, even if I'm a full white supremacist, well, not
Yep.
a supremacist, but if I fully believe in white supremacy, I deserve as a human being and a citizen of this United States of America to have a share of a share of the wealth of this country. And that means taking it away from the people who are hoarding it. That's what we need
Absolutely.
to do. Let's take
Right.
away that. We need to shake this system up and spread the wealth, and whatever you call it. I have no problem doing that. You can call
Right.
it
So,
what it is, whatever you may. I want that to happen, and I want it to go to people, even if they are fully white believing.
right. So the essence of what you're saying is we have to sort of channel, folks have to channel their energy in terms of the negativity they feel towards Trump and the government, and sort of channel it and funnel it into sort of a positive framework in terms of helping themselves and helping the
Yes,
lives of folks within their community,
yes,
sort of
yeah. Right,
transform that
absolutely.
energy.
Yes,
Right.
we've got it.
Right.
Yeah, so now we're back. Now we're Charles. We're exactly right on the same thing. And so,
Right.
however that is, because there was a certain energy that those patriots, those terrorists, there was a certain energy that they have. But see,
Absolutely.
they were also fully laced all through and through with a
Right.
belief in themselves and the
Right.
rightness of their being, because they're white and they deserve it. And so
Right.
we need to feel like we deserve everything,
Right.
because we're human beings, and we are citizens right now, because we're human beings and citizens of the United States. But
Right.
ultimately, we're going to have to look at life on this planet, and we're
Yep.
going to have to share, because where does all the wealth come from? It comes from the resources of the earth, and certain people have used other people to funnel all the wealth of those resources back to them. We need to change that. We need a share, and I'm not talking about a minor, minuscule crumb. I'm talking about a full share of the wealth. There's nobody in this country better than anybody else. We all
Right.
need to share in the wealth. And once we share in the wealth, then that's going to free us to be the creators that we are. We're not here. Why are we here as laborers? What
Right.
is that? That's just the creation of this system. This
Right.
system needs to change so that it frees, so that it's not going to do anything. We have to free ourselves so
Right.
that we can be who we are and bring beauty to the earth.
Right. So in essence, don't necessarily look for a savior outside of yourself to affect the change needed with regards to changing how you live within this society and within the world. So in other words, you are your own savior. So, and to that point, Black folks in particular, we need to recognize the power of the Black dollar in this country. From the Black dollar, we sort of sponsor and we sort of dive into all the most powerful aspects of how this society is run. And now it's extending now into government, because pretty much due to coming out in numbers, now we are essentially electing officials to represent us now in government. So our power is far reaching, but then, to your earlier point, it's just a matter of harnessing that power and now moving forward in terms of us as a Black people helping ourselves, and specifically helping with our communities in terms of moving forward in reference to just doing certain things in terms of building up our own social capital within our communities.
And see, if once we, as the Racial Justice Collaborative, you and I, and a handful of other people that want to do this, we begin to have open forums, and we ask the question, what do we want? And I mean, really go through the process of, unfolding and asking the question why and why and why, until we get to the essence of what we want. And then we find that out across the whole country. And then when we go to anywhere, we won't have to storm the Capitol and take it by force. We will go to our elected people as a community of people who know what we want, and we will, in one voice, say, this is what we want. And in fact, we insist. And when elected people or appointed people, anybody sees that, that is power.
Absolutely.
We don't know what we want. And when we go asking, it feels like begging, and it is begging, and we're all asking for different things. And the different things I want more money, I want more food, I want more housing, but what is it that we really want? We want the freedom to live in a way that a human being, we are children of God. That's who we are, whether you believe in God or not. We're all the children of God. Why don't this Christian nation that says it's Christian, why don't we treat our neighbors as ourselves? Why don't we just do that? So we don't do it because we are all asking for something different. And we don't care. We don't listen to each other. So it's all of that. But it all comes back to us. Yes, it comes back to me, but then I have to be willing to join with others to go into the hard process of unraveling until we get to what we want. And when we get to that, we will feel an energy that will go out, because we'll know that we all want the same thing. And then we'll find other groups and they all want the same thing. And then this is what we say we want.
And I think to that point,
this is exactly what we want. And we don't want something different. And don't try to hold this out. Don't say, I'm going to give you a job. That's not what I want. I want to be treated as a human being. And I want a fair share in the full wealth of the United States of America. That's what I want.
Right. And I think to that point, the ideas of just having forums, of just having all folks within the community. We can have police officers, and we're going to have police officers, school teachers, business owners, all coming to the table in terms of, outlining all the issues in which they're confronted with. And of course, having folks within the community sort of present their case as well, and then coming up with tangible solutions for dealing with the problem. And then from there, we're spearheading to what your point is, what you've been saying. The wants will sort of begin to get crystallized once those conversations are taking place within communities.
That's it, Charles. You're right. Yep. Let's think. That's a good word to use. I'm gonna write that down. Crystallize what it is, because we're human beings. We want. What do we want? We want to live. And we want a relative comfort. So what? There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody wants comfort. We want to be treated like human beings, and we want to be exalted for our creativity. So give us what we need so that we can do what we're here for, which is to create. And we, like you said, to bring it down to a practical level,
Right.
Yes, we'll go to when we go to the police, we go to the community. When we finish unraveling it, we'll see that the police want the same thing. They have a
Right.
job, they want to go, they want to be live when they come home. They don't want to live in fear. They want to live.
Right.
And the people in the community, what do they want? They don't want to be harassed by the police. They don't want to live in poverty. They don't want to beg. They want to live. We all want the freedom to live the lives that we're here to live. That's why we're
Absolutely.
here, to live, not
Yep.
to like beg and to scramble around. And so that's what we're going to find. And then we'll decide what we want to ask for, and we will get it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Whew, that was good. So, Charles, now that we have gotten to the core of this,
Right.
we've got to wrap this up, but can you say a few words, maybe to sum up what we've said today? Or, and also to
Absolutely.
talk before we finish. Can you talk
Right.
about some of the plans the Racial Justice Collaborative has so that other people can be watching for us in our work, and also invite them to come and help us, work with us, participate with us, join us?
Absolutely. And as we're mentioning, throughout our session today, what we're sort of mandating is a call to action from all like-minded individuals in terms of specifically eradicating white supremacy and racism from the scope of our thinking, from all aspects of our society. And specifically, what that's going to entail within the collaborative is having those public forums in which we're gathering individuals together, and we're pretty much having a conversation in terms of within your purview, what are some of the things that you're going through, and then coming to the table with viable solutions and action steps moving forward for tackling those issues within your community. And then working with individuals, let's say within the school setting, working with district leaders and helping them come up with a social justice framework in terms of teaching students. Because the essence of what we're asking for is not necessarily having students go onto Twitter, but what we're asking for is students being able to create Twitter platforms themselves to sort of self-empower themselves and their communities. We're talking about self-empowerment in every sense of the word. So it's going to be our charge to sort of mandate that within members of the community. And we're going to, go through different avenues for making sure that happens. So I think at the heart of what we're asking for, and it's what has been thrown around, is insurrectionists. Last week, those folks were insurrectionists. But then when you look at the definition of insurrection, it's sort of a violent uprising, right, against a government. So what we're calling for is not necessarily a violent uprising, but we're calling for all folks in some respects to represent sort of insurrectionist thinking in terms of making a change within your community, not necessarily looking for other folks within the government or whoever to do the job for you, but what specifically can you do in terms of being that change agent? How can you sort of be your own insurrectionist within your community? So not necessarily going with the status quo, but realizing you do have power. We show our power at the ballot box. So now it's time for us to begin showing our power through all aspects of this capitalist society. And if that means that, we have to tear a lot of the things down, which is currently constructed, well, then so be it. We're going to be those agents for change. But to do that, at the heart of what we are going to strive to do is empower folks. Self-empowerment, I think, is key, and we're going to be moving towards that within our actions within the collaborative.
And
And it's exciting,
let me
so
add to
exciting.
that. One of the things that we're going to do starting this by Friday of this week, we've got a number of people within the collaborative, and we all have a burning passion for something. We all are, we're educators, we are conflict resolution processors. And so one of the things that we are going to do is we're going to start to speak. Well, Charles talked about the power of the individual. So we're going to start to speak about what we think is important. How do we explain that the insurrection that happened at the Capitol is as American as apple pie? It's always been a part of white supremacy. and a part of the United States. And so we're going to talk about that, and we're bringing things out that were hidden. So each member of the collaborative is going to have an opportunity to more than once create 5 and 10-minute segments, and we're going to start to share those broadly. So if you see something, one of these with one of us talking, share it with all the people on your social media, and and send it out over your email. We're going to share our voice. The theme of the Racial Justice Collaborative is let every voice be heard. So we're going to start with letting our individual and collective as a collaborative voices be heard, so we can say what do we think is important. So and when you see one of those things and you agree with it, send a comment or send a question. Participate, join us is what we want to say. Join us now. The time is now. You're going to hear from the Racial Justice Collaborative starting soon in the next few days. So look for it. Thank you.
Time
Thank
is now.
everybody. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Yes. Okay. I thought that was good.
Yeah, so did I. Yeah, it's a coat of arms, Diane. You know, it's no more just like waiting for someone else to help you. We got to start empowering people to help themselves.
Yeah,
You
and we
know?
start with ourselves. And what we
Yes.
start is we start displaying our power.
Yes.
And we're going to, and this is also marketing, right? This
Yep.
is marketing 101. We're going to put ourselves out there so that people can see us. So they start thinking about who do we want to hear from? Let's hear from that person on the Racial Justice Collaborative.
Yes.
So this is marketing. We're doing an important work for society, and we're also doing work for ourselves, because that's important. But more than anything, I want to share the wealth of this country, and not just me. I want everybody to have a share. Why not? The structure we have is just the one that got created.
You saw, I'm sure you're aware of 6 conglomerates that pretty much own like all the various companies within this world, like what's his name, Rupert Murdoch and Sonia Redstone. They own everything, all aspects of our society at large.
It's called capitalism.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, I didn't say that word, but that's what has to change. And I believe in my heart that we can do it.
Right.
I believe that we can do it. I believe that the Racial Justice Collaborative, those of us who are willing and ready, can make a change, and we're going to go out and we're going to say that.
Yep. Here we go. Yep.
And I thought we did a good job today, because
I think so too.
I thought it was clear. I thought it was authentic, and I thought it was impassioned.
Right. We provide the historical context, and most importantly, we said what we can do as a collaborative in terms of helping you. So I think that's at the forefront of the work, presenting what we can do to sort of help.
Yeah, and we're going to show, because they're going to start seeing us everywhere.
Yep, I love it. Bombard them so that there's no escape. Oh my God, who's this collaborative? Okay, let me call. Let me reach out to Diane. I'm hearing so much about it. Let me see what they're all about.
So Let's do this. I'll write something up and send it to you. Like soon, before I teach a class at 6 yoga, so I'll be doing that at 6. But before I do that, because I've been thinking about this all day, so it's not going to be hard. And it's going to come a lot of it from the letter that I wrote to Lane, but I'm going to put it and say, this is what we're going to do. And this is an opportunity for you to speak. Every voice must be heard, including yours.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah. So giving folks a choice, sort of like, I'm not going to do it. I have better things to do. No, no, this is a mandate. You have to do it.
yeah,
You have to
yeah,
do it.
this
Yeah.
is yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'll send it to you, and you add, you add whatever you think.
Okay.
Make it as strong as you want,
You got
and
it. You got it.
then then we'll send it out under both of our signatures.
Okay.
And
Okay.
but let's say that it flows out. We started working on this podcast. I
Yeah.
mean, if Farrell too, he could sign it too if he. But see, there's a difference in two people also can be very strong. I've liked what you and Farrell have talked about in the past, but today, because it's just me and you,
Hmm.
we talked about what we talk about,
Yeah.
and
Right. Right.
so I will add Farrell's name because he's young. I want him to be included,
Absolutely.
and we want him to promote him because he's young,
Oh,
and
and to that
we
point,
need the youth. We need the
yeah.
youth.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, in terms of, bringing to the table with you and Farrell, just in terms of that mentoring aspect, that peer mentoring, want to, bring it to your attention in terms of how do we sort of start mentoring the youth, particularly young Black males. And
Well, you know what? Think about bringing in more.
oh, there you go. Yep.
Think about bringing in more,
Yep.
and people who are ready to do something and are ready to work together. Really.
Right.
So you'll see. All you have to do is get that in your, on your wave, and people will show up.
Right.
But we need to mentor the youth, and it's just like what I said. I'm not going to blame Black people for anything because look at that. If you've never watched Eyes on the Prize, you should watch it. It's like
Mhm.
so compelling
Right.
because you see that how hard they fought. And how did they fight? They had to fight themselves while people were throwing rocks and pouring stuff over their head and beating them up. They didn't fight back. I'm not saying it's not, that
Absolutely.
was those times. These are not those times.
Right.
This is not
Right.
time, but this is time for us to use our brains.
Yep. Yep. And to that point, we're afforded a lot more opportunities now. So, yeah, to that point, how do we sort of empower ourselves to sort of create our own avenues for success
Yeah.
rather than just going to the road that's been often traveled? Create, the road that's been less traveled. Create our own road for success, as opposed to just
Well, once
just
we
go about what the
become
white people have created.
successful,
Yeah.
people will join us.
Yes.
People always join something that's successful. That's why people wanted to run out into the white community because
Yep.
that was successful. It has all the money. It's got all the stuff.
Of course.
Once
Of
we
course.
have all the stuff, things will change.
Right. Right.
At the same
Right.
time, I want this money. And I also want reparations. That's
Yep.
a whole nother, soon we can start beating that drum.
Absolutely. I think it should have been a mandate for electing individuals, but you know what? Sometimes you got to work backwards to move forward. So we got them in there. So now that has to be the charge.
And we
how
have
do
to
we get
stay on it. We
Yeah.
have to stay on it. But we also have to get all those Black people in all those southern states that are more than anybody else in the population to vote.
Yes. Right. Which they did in record numbers, but it's often, it's easy for folks to think negative as opposed to positive. So now you got to sort of channel it. It's easier for folks. I think it's always easier for someone to be angry at someone than sort of like sponsor love. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way. But a lot of folks voted because they were angry, with regards to Trump and certain things. So now we got to sort of get folks to think, vote in terms of love. So I'm voting in this person because I love what this person does.
If you look down through the southern states, and you look at South Carolina, North Carolina, and
right.
and Georgia and Mississippi and Alabama,
right.
like 50% of the population is Black.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so why don't we have everything?
Right. Right. Right.
And that's the reason they fought. So we're going to get the vote too. People have to come out and vote. But I think if we start to ask people, because even the asking people, what do you want? That makes people think and may become more interested in the bigger plan, which is to press and say, this is what we want.
It's funny, Diane. I mean, the good book says you have not because you ask them. And I think a lot of folks, to your early point, don't know what they want. they want to hold, they want money, they want this, but they don't know the means in which to create
They
the
don't know
vehicle for
why.
getting it.
They don't know,
Yeah.
because that's why
Right.
you get things like, I want a car, I want a house, and you get them and you still don't, you're not happy. You don't want, well, that's because we have never really figured out what we want. That's the biggest thing.
Right.
That's not
Right.
an easy question.
Right. But I think once those conversations begin taking place,
Yeah.
I think it's going to become crystal clear for individuals,
Yeah.
in
For
terms of what we
me,
want.
it became crystal clear. What do I want? I want the freedom to live
Right.
well.
Right.
That's what I want. So so if I have the freedom to live well, and if I think I need a new car, I get a new car. If I need a different house, I get that house, because
Right.
that's what it takes. I want freedom. I want the
Right.
freedom to choose for myself and to have what I want.
Right. Right. Exactly
And
right.
not just one thing, everything. I deserve everything. That's
There you go.
my
Love it.
mantra. Right.
Yep. I love it. I love it.
Okay, so I will get off now so I can write something up, send it to
Okay.
you. You change whatever, send it back, and I'll put it out. I'm going to start using Slack, but I'm not going to use it this minute. I'll
Okay.
send it out just as an email.
Okay.
This is still a call to action.
Yep.
This is our continued call to action. See, the other thing is, for the collaborative, other people can come up with stuff too.
Absolutely. I think that's the point. To your earlier point, yeah, you just want folks to sort of, what you said with Amina and I, just sort of like organically create something,
Yeah.
and then I'll take a look at it. Absolutely. Yep.
The question of what do you want? What do they want? What do the members of the collaborative want that they're
Right.
willing to work for?
There you go. Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exciting times. I'm excited. I
Yeah.
truly am.
Well, I mean, you've been a big pusher for this whole thing. You
Right.
wanted this part. That's why you said you wanted to be a member, because you see a lot of potential. Because
do.
we can share this with the world.
Right.
We got a podcast, no longer asking people to come on, which we can still do that, but we're now,
Mhm.
I think our voices are as important as anybody that we could bring.
Exactly. This is a good way to start it. Now we could bring folks in, but we had to
Yes.
set the foundation. I think we did that. I think we
And
definitely
look,
did that.
we've built from week to week.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And it's so much something to talk about, which makes it easier. Like literally the world is crumbling and we can actually like observe it and then articulate it. So it makes it easy.
And pretty soon we'll have some suggestions for what needs to happen.
Right.
Right now we're just trying to get our own numbers to do something. This is a call. Okay, it's a continued call to action. And now, what are you willing to do? And that's what we can say also. If I'm not coming up and Charles is not coming up with the things you want to do, what do you want to do?
Absolutely.
Bring those things forward and we'll see.
Absolutely. Yes. Exciting times.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
All right then. Yeah, talk to you in a bit. Okay.
Yep. I'll send this to you soon. Okay.
You got it.
Bye.
Take care.